Jen.
Sleeping Beauty's real name was Priscilla and was no beauty. Don't get me wrong, she was very pretty on the outside, but on the inside, that was a different story entirely. Her beautiful brown hair did fall in perfect curls, but she made 5 maids redo it a dozen times each morning.
Redo it, I don't like it.
And while she did have big blue eyes, they never twinkled with merriment. Instead, they glittered with malice and glared with anger. Her pretty mouth never smiled. It was too busy pouting, whining, and yelling. Since the day she was born, Priscilla was absolutely convinced that she was far superior to everybody, and she treated all of her parents' subjects and servants accordingly. She ordered them about day and night, making them run back and forth for her pleasure.
Go get me food.
She never said please or thank you. Instead, she stomped her feet, shook her fist, and complained about everything. Nothing was ever good enough. Her meals were too hot or too cold, her dresses were too tight or too loose, the furniture was too hard or too soft, and so on. As well as you can imagine, not only did Priscilla dislike everybody, but the feeling was definitely neutral.
Much unlike Priscilla, her parents, the king and queen, were very kind. They loved their subjects and ruled them fairly. They were both extremely distressed about their only child's behavior and did all they could to improve her disposition. When Priscilla was a child, they hired the best storytellers and musicians to perform for her. They brought in other children for Priscilla to play with and filled her room with piles of toys. But Priscilla was rude to the storytellers, broke the musicians' instruments, and chased away the children. She hoarded her toys and asked for more, but she never played with them.
The king and queen became desperate. They even tried putting extra sugar onto her meals, hoping to sweeten her temper. But although the court dentist was pretty busy, nothing worked.
As Priscilla's 16th birthday approached, the king said to the queen with tears in her eyes,
"I'm at my wit's end. I have tried everything I could think of, and nothing has worked. Our daughter is awful. She will never be good successor to the throne.
And no one will ever want to marry her, even for half a kingdom. Besides, she would never accept anyone as a husband anyway."
Before we give up, maybe we should consult our council once more. Perhaps someone has thought of a new idea we can try."
and that's what they did. All the royal counselors gathered in the royal meeting hall to offer their advice on this vexing situation.
After 16 years, they were all out of ideas. Eventually, everyone realized that somebody had to say something. He was retiring soon, and that he felt he could take a little risk.
Ahem. Let us approach this problem practically. For 16 years, we have been racking our brains to determine how to make Princess Priscilla more pleasant. Perhaps we should approach this dilemma from another angle. When is the princess most pleasant?
This was a difficult question. The princess was seldom in a good mood. Finally, after a lot of head scratching, one counselor said,
"The princess seemed to be in a very good mood when I saw her yesterday.
Well, what was she doing?
She was twisting the royal cat's tail."
The counselor wished he kept that thought to himself.
Yes, well, thank you. That wasn't exactly what I was looking for.
What's the use? Priscilla's only pleasant when she's sleeping.
Aha! Sleep is known to have a curative and soothing powers. Maybe all the princess needs is a nice, long sleep.
What do you mean? Priscilla keeps quiet even if the bed is never made to her satisfaction.
When I say a long sleep, I mean a really long sleep. One that may last for years, if necessary.
For years?
Well, we could have the court magician cast a spell that would make the princess sleep until her temper, shall we say, mellows.
I guess that might work.
What if she never mellows? We can't just let her sleep forever.
I have it. The spell will work until either the princess becomes pleasant and happy or until 100 years have passed. If she is still sleeping after 100 years, a prince will find her and blow her a kiss, ending the spell.
Well, we have to think about this for a while. No matter how terrible she is, Priscilla is still our daughter, and we must do what's best for her.
On that note, the relieved council dispersed, and the king and queen retired to their chambers. After months of thinking and watching Priscilla gleefully reduce everyone around her to tears by both cruel words and cruel actions, the sad parents concluded that a long sleep was Priscilla's only hope.
Once they reached that decision, the king and queen had to find a way to carry it out. After consulting the court magician, they decided to throw Priscilla a specific party. They would have present her with an enchanted spindle as one of her gifts. The careless princess was sure to prick herself, unleashing the spell.
On the day of her birthday, Priscilla had a great time. She yelled at all of the maids who helped her get ready, pulled their hair, and made them change her dress 20 times.
No, I hate that dress. I don't like that one.
On the way to the ballroom, she tripped the servants who were carrying trays of food to the dining room, and then laughed heartily when they scrambled to pick up the broken dishes and clean up the food. She kicked her pet dog hard enough to send it flying across the room. And then she snipped the blossoms off all the flower arrangements.
During the party, she continued to enjoy herself. While dancing, she stomped on her partner's feet with her spike-like heels. She wore specifically for that purpose. While all the guests in their fancy clothes sat down to dinner, Priscilla began to spill red wine and throw food at everybody at her table. The guests were horrified, but said nothing. After all, she was the princess, and it was her birthday. The king and queen sat helplessly and watched while their daughter terminated the four gifts. They knew that if anyone reproached Priscilla, she would throw a tantrum.
Finally, the time for opening gifts arrived. Priscilla ran to the pile of beautifully wrapped packages and began ripping bows and paper. As she unwrapped each present, she made fun of it and the person who gave it to her. Naturally, nothing was good enough for her, and she did not fail to let anyone know it. Eventually, she opened the spindle.
Oh. A spindle. Whoever heard of giving a princess a spin? Whoever heard of a princess spinning? I certainly don't intend to spend my time on such a stupid activity. Oh, but I think it will make a good use of this sharp point. Yes, indeed. It will make my servants move a little bit faster.
Examining her new weapon, Priscilla brushed the sharp point with her finger.
Ouch! Oh yes, this will do just fine.
If the guests thought this behavior was strange, they did not mention it. They were only too happy to say their goodbyes and tiptoe out of the palace. Most of them had come to the party out of respect for the king and queen, and while they pitied the poor couple, the guests did not want to spend any more time with the unpleasant princess than was absolutely necessary.
After the guests left, the king and queen placed their daughter in a tower just outside the castle wall, thinking that a prince was more likely to kiss her if he did not have to go through the whole palace to reach her. The queen put the spindle near the bed, and at the sight of it made them too sad to keep it in the castle. The king and queen made sure Priscilla was comfortably and beautifully dressed, and that the room was warm and clean, and they visited her every day.
As time passed, fewer people remembered Priscilla, and the tower in the woods became the center of the legend. The only true thing that people remember was Priscilla's great beauty. People added new elements to the story, creating fairies and jealous witches to make it more interesting. Someone even insisted that the princess was cursed because one fairy felt snubbed when she was not invited to the birthday party. And so Sleeping Beauty Princess became more mysterious until remember how nasty Priscilla has been.
After about 100 years after Priscilla went to sleep, a prince was riding through the forest around the walls of the old castle. He had heard many stories about the beautiful and mysterious sleeping princess, and as he was rather conceited, he was sure that she was meant for him. He spent days wandering through the forest, hoping to catch a glimpse of the tower. The thorny branches tore his clothes and skin. He and his horse were tired and hungry, but the prince was determined to accomplish his mission, and the poor horse did not have a choice.
One morning he spotted the tower, which was lit by the rising sun. The prince hardly noticed the next few hours he had hacked his way through the bush. He was busy imagining what the princess would look like and composing what he would say to her. When the prince finally reached over the tower, he found the door open. He flew up the curving stairs, breathless with anticipation. The stairs ended abruptly, and suddenly the prince burst into the big room, in the middle of which the prince was sleeping in a large, luxurious bed.
moment he realized he had not been completely convinced that all the stories he'd heard were true. The princess was as breathtaking beautiful as he imagined her, for once her face was relaxed and not screwed up in a scowl. Her many curls spilled onto the pillow, framing her face, and her clothes were very becoming. That century-old fashion was just coming back into style.
The prince slowly approached the princess, blows a kiss, stepped back, and waited to see whether the enchanted princess would wake up as Leslie said she would.
The story was true. Slowly, Priscilla opened her eyes and stretched. Then she looked up, saw the prince gazing at her with love in his eyes.
You see, Priscilla was not a morning person. The poor prince stumbled and fell backwards. And all the words he composed fell out of his head.
That was certainly not what the prince expected.
What in the world do you think you're doing? How dare you barge into my room and kiss me? Guards, guards!
As Priscilla's smooth forehead wrinkled in rage, her large blue eyes narrowed with hostility, and her round cheeks flushed with angry red. Her bright face was turned downright ugly.
The flabbergasted prince crawled backwards toward the door, rolled down the stairs, jumped on his horse, and galloped away.
The prince never told anyone what happened, and he was sure that no one would believe him, or that anyone who did laugh at him for the rest of his life. One thing he did not know for sure, he would be a lot more careful around whom he kissed in the future.
Meanwhile, Priscilla was becoming unhappier by the second. She soon realized that she was not in her room in the castle and that no one was rushing to answer her call. In her anger, she climbed off the bed and began stomping around the room. She flung a chair across the room and kicked the night table. Then she noticed the spindle that her unhappy mother had left by the bed. The enraged princess grabbed the spindle and aimed it at the window. As she did so, one of the spindle's sharp points pricked Priscilla's hand. Unfortunately for Priscilla, 100 years had not erased the spindle's magic, and she began to feel very sleepy. She barely had time to climb back in bed before her eyes closed into a deep and peaceful slumber.
Here ends the real story of Sleeping Beauty. As far as I know, she still sleeps in the tower in the forest, still beautiful and still unmellow.